There are exactly 7 sentences that can make a narcissist retreat from you, as though you had just held up something sacred in front of something dark. Their strength doesn't come from being cruel or wounding. It comes from being true. And nothing frightens a narcissist more than the truth. Let's be honest about something first. Most people who try to stand up to a narcissist fail, and they fail badly. Why? Because they walk into a battlefield the narcissist has chosen, carrying weapons that don't just fail to work, they actually feed the enemy. You show up with your emotions, your sense of fairness, your longing for peace and mutual understanding. None of that builds closeness with a narcissist. Those are simply openings for them to use against you. It's like trying to hold a calm conversation with a hurricane. It cannot succeed. The real error is thinking you're having a normal disagreement, when in fact you're inside a psychological battle. The narcissist constructs a distorted version of reality, one where they are the noble, mistreated main character, and you are the flawed, foolish supporting role who owes them endlessly. Every time you erupt, every burst of anger, every tear, every desperate plea, you are stepping onto their map and confirming it as real. And on that ground, they always win. Everything changes the instant you stop reacting and start responding instead. A reaction is an explosion, uncontrolled energy escaping all at once. The shouting, the sudden flinch, the outburst. A response is something else entirely. It's quiet, deliberate, grounded. It is the decision to burn their false map and stand only on what you actually know to be real. This is where your words stop being weapons and become something sturdier, building blocks for a version of reality so solid their delusions can't dent it. To see why this works, you need to understand what actually drives narcissism underneath all the performance and self-praise. What terrifies a narcissist isn't your rage. It isn't your reasoning. It's simply being seen clearly. Their whole identity is a wall built, piece by painful piece, around a core of shame and inadequacy. It's a glittering fortress designed to hide a frightened, wounded person inside. This isn't an excuse for their behavior. It's a strategic insight for you. Their deepest fear is that someone will spot the cracks in that wall, that someone will catch even a glimpse of the small, pitiful reality they're desperate to bury. They live in constant dread of being truly known. That's why certain calm, unhostile words act like triggers. They don't attack the fortress, they simply illuminate it. They act as a mirror, and in that mirror, the narcissist doesn't see the godlike figure they've built themselves into. They see the outline of the fraud they're terrified of being. They aren't afraid you'll hurt them. They're afraid you'll see them, and that being seen will collapse the entire illusion they depend on to exist. Pause here for a second. Has a difficult person ever backed off instantly after you said something simple, and you weren't quite sure why it worked? Maybe you were just tired of arguing, or too worn out to keep explaining, and something plain and direct came out of your mouth, and suddenly the chaos just stopped. There's a real mechanism behind that. You may have stumbled onto this principle without even realizing it. Which brings us to the idea of verbal boundaries. Setting a boundary through language is not aggression. Aggression tries to control or wound someone else. What we're talking about here, plain truth-telling, is an act of self-control. It's refusing to let another person define your reality for you. Think of it like a property line. Aggression is stepping onto someone else's land. A boundary is simply standing firmly on your own and saying, calmly, you don't get to cross here. The words themselves are only half the equation. Tone and delivery carry the other half. A boundary shouted in anger isn't a boundary anymore. It's an invitation to fight, because it shows you're still standing on emotional ground, exactly where the narcissist wants you. But a boundary delivered with the flat, steady certainty of a fact, that's something their mind struggles to process. It's like trying to divide by 0. It breaks the rules of the game they thought they were playing. Your calm becomes a mirror for their chaos, and that's unbearable for them to look at. What happens once you master this? It's bigger than managing one difficult relationship. It reshapes you. The respect you begin receiving, even from the narcissist, isn't something they hand over willingly. It grows naturally out of the respect you now have for yourself. You stop being a character in their story because you've chosen to stop performing the role. You become the author of your own narrative instead. That's where real strength lies. Here's something uncomfortable to sit with. Narcissists don't look down on you because you're weak. They target you because you carry something they desperately want and can never truly have, genuine self-worth, and that terrifies them. Choosing a target is never random for a narcissist. It's a calculated instinct, sharpened over a lifetime of chasing what they lack. Picture predators scanning a herd. They don't attack just anyone. They study, they test, they look for particular traits, and contrary to what you'd expect, they don't usually go for the weakest. They go for the strongest, the ones brimming with life, because that's where the biggest reward waits. So what makes you such an appealing target? First, your empathy, your capacity to feel deeply, to understand, to extend the benefit of the doubt. That's a language the narcissist doesn't speak naturally, but knows exactly how to exploit. To them, your empathy isn't a virtue. It's an open door. Your competence is another draw. You're good at what you do, disciplined, capable of real results. That competence becomes something they want to seize and wear as their own to prop up their fantasy of greatness. And finally, your integrity, your basic decency, your commitment to honesty, your instinct to do right. This might be the strongest pull of all, because being honest yourself, you assume others are too. Being conscientious, you can't easily picture someone who operates with zero conscience. Your greatest strength becomes the very thing used against you. That's the cruel twist of this dynamic. The light in you is exactly what draws the darkness closer. The narcissist sees your wholeness, your genuine capacity to care and achieve, and it becomes both something they envy and something they want to destroy, because its existence is a constant reminder of the emptiness inside them. Once you're chosen, testing begins, quietly, not with dramatic confrontations. Small probes, a backhanded compliment, a promise that mysteriously gets forgotten. A joke aimed at you, sharp enough to sting, but light enough that if you object, you're suddenly the one with no sense of humor. Each of these is a small experiment, a silent question. Will you tolerate this? Can I get away with it? Your response, or lack of one, is the data they're gathering. If you laugh it off, make excuses for them, or let it slide to keep the peace, you've just handed them the map to your limits, and they will push further. The forgotten promise becomes a broken agreement. The sharp joke becomes public humiliation. It's a slow, deliberate erosion of your boundaries. This is the real difference between ordinary human conflict and narcissistic mistreatment. In a healthy relationship, disagreements happen and get resolved together. With a narcissist, it isn't a disagreement. It's a campaign, a steady wearing down of your standards until you're standing somewhere you swore you'd never allow. This escalating pattern is what I'd call the disrespect cycle, and it's one of the most damaging forms of manipulation there is. It starts small, a flicker of irritation, a sense that something's unfair, but you brush it off because you're a decent person who doesn't want to make a scene over something minor. But that first small violation, once tolerated, quietly becomes the new baseline. The next one will be a bit bigger, and the one after that, bigger still. The narcissist needs you to accept this pattern because it constantly reinforces their skewed sense of entitlement. Your silence becomes your agreement. You're being trained, one moment at a time, to accept what should never be acceptable. Each time you don't hold the line quietly moves. And the unsettling part is how fast people adapt. The mind is built to adjust, but that same feature can be turned against you. Constant, gradual disrespect starts to feel ordinary. Walking on eggshells, managing someone else's moods, becomes your new normal until you forget what basic decency even feels like. So why do thoughtful, caring people so often miss this pattern while it's unfolding? Mostly because their own instincts work against them. Your desire for harmony, your wish to smooth things over, to see the best in others, becomes a liability here. You project your own decency onto them, telling yourself they didn't mean it that way, or they're just having a hard day. You start doubting the reality that someone could be deliberately mistreating you because that thought feels unbearable. This spirals into a corrosive kind of self-doubt. Am I too sensitive? Am I overreacting? That's the narcissist's most effective trick, convincing you the real problem is your response, not their behavior. You become an unreliable witness in your own story. But eventually there's a breaking point. A moment of disrespect, so clear it cuts through all the fog of self-doubt, when the accumulated weight of every small violation becomes too much. It's a jarring moment of clarity, seeing the pattern for exactly what it is, realizing with a chill that something has to change. And that change starts with you, not them. What follows are not insults. They're precision tools built from truth. Using them isn't about hurting anyone. It's about establishing what's real. And for a narcissist, reality is the most dangerous weapon that exists. The first, I see what you're doing. Few phrases terrify a manipulator more because their entire method depends on being able to deny their real intentions. They thrive in ambiguity, the subtle jab, the quiet put-down, the innocent-sounding question meant to plant insecurity, precisely because they can always retreat from it, claim you misread them, call you oversensitive. But this phrase cuts straight through that fog. It announces that you're not fooled, that you're not a piece on their board, but a conscious observer of the whole game. You don't need to explain what you saw. The power lies in the ambiguity of your awareness. It says, the game is over. I know your moves. And in that instant, the balance shifts permanently. Their disguise is gone, and being exposed is their deepest fear. Second, that's not my responsibility. Narcissists are experts at offloading blame. Their failures, their moods, their chaos, none of it is ever their fault. It's always your shortcoming, your lack of support, your failure to anticipate their needs. They hand you the weight of their problems and expect you to carry it. This phrase hands it right back. It's a radical act of boundary setting, drawing a clean line around your own responsibility so that you answer only for your own actions and they for theirs. It will feel strange at first, especially if you're naturally inclined to help. But there's a real difference between helping someone and enabling them. Carrying their burdens for them isn't kindness, it's enablement. Refusing to do it isn't cruelty either. It forces them, perhaps for the first time, to face the consequences of their own choices. Third, I won't be spoken to that way. This isn't a request, it's a standard. Narcissists systematically lower your tolerance through escalating disrespect, testing small insults, and when you absorb them, pushing further. This phrase halts that process immediately, but it only works delivered with calm finality, never anger. Anger says you've hurt me. Calm finality says this is a line that will not be crossed. One invites a fight, the other ends a violation. It isn't a threat. A threat says if you speak to me that way, I will. A boundary simply states what you will and won't accept. It needs no further justification. It's a declaration of self-worth. I am someone who deserves basic respect, and that is the entry price for being in my life. Fourth, your feelings about this are not my problem. Narcissists weaponize their emotions, their rage, their tears, their sulking, their theatrical victimhood. None of it is genuine feeling. It's a control strategy meant to make you scramble to soothe them. They want you to believe their emotional stability is your job. This phrase severs that connection. It's a declaration of emotional independence. You're a capable adult and solely responsible for your own emotional state. It will feel harsh because decent people feel responsible for others' feelings. But you are not obligated to regulate another adult's emotions. By stepping back from their emotional theater, you hand self-determination back to them, forcing them to sit with their own feelings instead of using them as leverage over you. Fifth, I don't need to justify myself to you. Have you ever been trapped in an endless argument, constantly explaining and re-explaining your choices, your feelings, your very existence? That's a deliberate trap. They play prosecutor, and you're stuck on the witness stand, and the more you explain, the more material you hand them to twist. Over-explaining signals that you think their approval determines whether your decisions are valid. This phrase refuses to take the stand. It says you are the final authority on your own life. Your reasons are your own, and you don't need their permission or validation. Standing quietly in your own choices without needing their endorsement is enormously powerful. Sixth, this conversation is over. This is your emergency exit, the tool for when a discussion has become a circular, exhausting performance designed to confuse and dominate rather than communicate. You are not required to sit through a conversation going nowhere, not obligated to be an audience for manipulation. Saying this, and then actually leaving the room or ending the call, is the clearest proof of a boundary in action. It shows your time and mental energy are valuable resources you refuse to waste on pointless, damaging exchanges. It proves through action that you mean what you say. Seventh, I'm not interested in your opinion of me. This lands at the very center of the narcissistic dynamic. If the entire relationship, from their view, rests on them being the judge and you the one judged, they need your fear of their disapproval to maintain control. Their opinion is their currency of power. Stating plainly and calmly that their opinion no longer matters bankrupts that entire system. It's not something said in a fit of frustration. It's a statement of arrived at self-validation. It says, I know who I am, I have my own compass, my own sense of worth, and your evaluation is simply no longer required. It's the moment you stop looking to them for a reflection of yourself and find it within instead. These phrases hit so hard, not because they're cruel, but because they demolish the central lie the narcissist's entire personality is built on. To understand that lie, you have to understand the shaky, oversized structure of the narcissistic mind. What they've built is a false self, an inflated, heroic, uniquely victimized, endlessly important persona that exists for one purpose: to constantly pull in outside admiration, which they treat as fuel. This false self has no real foundation. It's hollow, and like any idol, it needs constant worship to keep from collapsing. That craving for affirmation isn't just vanity, it's existential. Without the reflection of admiration in other people's eyes, the false self starts to crumble, threatening to expose the emptiness it was built to hide. That's why even a small boundary or a simple refusal to cooperate isn't taken as a minor disagreement. To the narcissist, it's a direct threat to their entire structure, a crack in the idol. When you say, I see what you're doing, or that's not my responsibility, you are withholding the worship the false self requires. In that moment, you become a non-believer, and your refusal threatens to reveal to them, and possibly to everyone watching, that their God is fake. This is the real difference between healthy confidence and pathological grandiosity. A confident person's sense of self comes from within, built on real ability and experience. A grandiose person's sense of self is entirely external, a fragile reflection dependent on others' reactions. Your honest words don't threaten their strength. They expose their terrifying fragility. Underneath the dazzling mask sits something else entirely: raw, unfiltered shame. At the center of the narcissist is a deep-seated belief in their own worthlessness. This is the original wound, the terror their whole personality exists to outrun, and they've spent a lifetime constructing an alternate reality where they're the opposite of everything they secretly fear they are. The verbal tools we've covered work because they slip past the grandiose walls and speak directly to that buried shame. Refusing to take blame holds up a mirror to their culpability. Refusing to manage their emotions forces them to face their own internal disorder. Refusing to seek their approval quietly reveals their judgment carries no weight. Each of these is a form of exposure, and exposure triggers an overwhelming wave of that core shame, the feeling of being seen not as the glorious idol they perform, but as the flawed being they secretly believe themselves to be. That is intolerable to them. Their entire defense system exists to avoid exactly that feeling. To be truly seen is, to them, to be destroyed. How does a narcissist hold onto power in a relationship? Mostly through confusion and doubt. They're experts in word salad, circular arguments, manipulation that makes you question your own sanity. They generate a fog of emotional and intellectual chaos. And inside that fog, they control the terrain because you've lost your bearings. Direct, clear language is the antidote to that fog. Phrases like "this conversation is over" or "I don't need to justify myself" are acts of radical clarity. They refuse to enter the fog at all. You're planting your flag on solid ground and declining to be dragged into their swamp of confusion. By withdrawing from their games entirely, you strip them of power because their tactics only work with your participation. Once you stop participating, their strategies are exposed for exactly what they are: obvious, almost pitiful attempts at manipulation. There's also a real psychological effect when you meet a narcissist's chaos with steady calm. Narcissists are masters of projection, taking the parts of themselves they can't face, their rage, their incompetence, their dishonesty, and pinning it on you instead. They'll accuse you of anger while they're the one raging, call you manipulative while they play every game in the book, all so they never have to confront their own darkness. But when you answer with calm, grounded truth, that process breaks down. You're no longer absorbing the projection. You're reflecting it straight back. Your calm highlights their chaos. Your steadiness exposes their instability. Your integrity throws their lack of it into sharp relief. For a brief, unbearable moment, they're forced to see themselves clearly, and that discomfort is enormous. Your refusal to be their emotional dumping ground forces them to sit, finally, in their own disorder. This isn't a game of wit. It's a real, measurable shift in the psychological balance between you.